Hi there, welcome to podcast episode number 25. I'm very proud to announce that not only did I finish my filet crochet top that I was struggling to work on for like 2.5 months, I'm wearing it as a finished object today, but also I have another finished object that was in my plans last time, that never happens, and all of the other plans that I mentioned in my last episode have solidified and are actually happening. I don't know what's going on. Things are going a little bit too well. I am expecting to run into major trouble with some of my projects any time now, really. Things never go this well, so well, I'm pretty excited to share about everything I've been up to. I also have some new whips on my needles. I need some advice on one of them definitely, but let's chat about the one I am actually wearing first. So this is a filet crochet top that I cast on in the beginning of summer, about 2.5 months ago. I didn't quite know where to go with my summer knitting. Everybody was starting to talk about making tops, and I didn't have anything on my list that I was super excited to cast on, so I kept browsing Ravelry. I didn't know where to go, and then I remembered I know how to crochet as well, and I have a bunch of crochet thread in stash that I got from my grandma. I had only worked with crochet thread like once prior to that, I believe. So it wasn't something I had in my rotation really that I knew I had a bunch of projects for, and I did a doily with filet crochet about like over a year ago now, a year and a half maybe. And I like did 2 bookmarks somewhere in between that, like tiny projects with that thread, and I'm looking to get it out of stash. I don't really want to keep that much crochet thread around if I'm not really using it, so I thought maybe doing a filet crochet top would be a fun little project, would be nice to try making some crochet garments for once, and I cast this on. There wasn't a ton of planning involved. I think I had the idea and then I started on it about half an hour later. So I did a tiny little gauge swatch to figure out how many squares I needed to like fit around my body, and then the chart I put on the front I took from some vintage crochet magazines that I also got from my grandma. They're all like doily patterns or just like table decorations in the widest sense of the word. But I don't need any of that, so I just took one of the charts that I enjoyed and I slapped it on here, made some changes to it so it would fit on my top, and then I cast on for the front panel and was promptly reminded that I am actually pretty slow at crocheting. I just don't do it enough, and I never like properly learned how to do it, I would say, in comparison to knitting at least. In knitting, I just have a bunch of very technical, detailed information about every single thing that I'm doing, and in crochet it was much more going with the flow. I feel like that's easier to do in crochet. Maybe it probably depends on what exactly you're doing, but for the most part I find that the crochet stitches are really good at hiding little inconsistencies and mistakes, whereas a fabric like stockinette in knitting is really not. So for crochet I was just inventing a stitch if I needed one. I was just kind of leaving one out if I didn't need it anymore. I never properly learned how to do anything, to be honest. And anyway, I hadn't crocheted in quite a while, and it took me a good moment to get back into holding my needle and my thread and everything. On top of that, crochet thread is never overly fun to work with. It's just very tiny and stiff and rough, and it wasn't the most fun time, but I would say for the first like half of the front panel I was still kind of motivated, because in filet crochet, if you're not familiar with it, you create these tiny squares out of double crochets and chain stitches, and then you can either decide to leave them empty like that, or you can decide to fill the squares with more double crochets, and that way you can get a pattern to show up. So that's what I was doing, and in the beginning I was still very excited to see the pattern show up. Like I was looking forward to the next row, so I would like see more of the design, and that excitement kind of faded pretty quickly, and I ended up putting this project aside for a good while. I remember there was one weekend where I like properly picked it up and did a lot of work on it, and after the weekend I felt like I had spent so many hours on this and there was still barely any progress, which just discouraged me more. I was also designing a sweater over the summer, so that also took a lot of my like knitting or crocheting time, and this was just not really my main project. It was nice to have it there in the background and occasionally do like a row or two if I didn't have anything else to do, but I never quite got to actually working on this, and it was just not that exciting because it was so slow. So I actually finished like I think 2 knitted tops also in the meantime while working on this. There was just a bunch going on, and it was not this one. And at some point I sat down and I finished the front panel because I was a bit worried that I would abandon this project. And then when I was done with that, I didn't quite know what to do about the back panel. because my back panel, or my plan originally was to put another design on it, like similar to the top part of this front design, but like smaller and in the middle of the back and all that. And the longer I stayed at the front, the more I felt like the back panel wouldn't really look good like that. So then I thought the best thing to do would be to just do the same design as I have on the front. But that would have meant so much more work, and also I was not quite sure with the amount of thread I have if I would have enough to finish another panel exactly like it, because as I was saying, I'm trying to get the crochet thread out of stash, so I definitely didn't want to buy more. And I have various colors. I have a bunch of really colorful ones where I have just a single ball of them. Some of them have already like been worked with, so I'm not always sure how much I have of each color. Then I have a bunch of a really bright white, and then I had, I think, 3 balls of this off-white color that I decided to use for this top. I was kind of hoping that would be enough for all of it and that would get all of the off-white out of stash, which it did, but I was cutting it kind of close, so when I weighed my front panel I had about 76 grams if I remember correctly, and I was thinking if I try to make the back panel the exact same, it probably won't work out because you obviously need some extra yarn, and also the back is supposed to sit a bit higher, so I would have needed like a few more stitches for that, and it just seemed a bit too risky to try that. So in the end, I just decided to leave the back panel completely plain, just with empty squares, because that seemed like the quickest way to get it done, the easiest way to do it with the amount of thread that I had left. And I just thought that if I'm already not excited to work on this project and I'm already just doing it to get it done so it's not an abandoned project and I can wear it this summer, then I probably shouldn't make it more complicated for myself than it has to be. So I set it on the back, I think for last podcast episode, because I was saying the episode before that I didn't want this project to become an abandoned one. And then when it became time to film my last episode and I hadn't really worked on it, I kind of felt like I was abandoning it a little bit. So the evening before I sat down and I cast on for the back panel and I did a few rows on that, and it seemed to go quickly. I was pretty excited last time. I thought I had this, I would just crank out the back panel. And then of course I ran into a problem because of the 3 balls of the off-white crochet thread that I had, 2 were by the same brand and then there was a third one by a different brand. And I didn't originally think of that as much of a problem because when I knitted this big filet crochet doily a year before, I used a bunch of different brand threads in that and it all worked out, like as long as they were the same color and like roughly the same gauge, which all crochet threads kind of are. I couldn't tell any difference in the finished object, so I thought this would be fine. I didn't really give it much thought before I started, but then I realized that for a doily that's kind of like round and worked inside out, it probably doesn't make that much of a difference if suddenly your stitches are a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, because it's growing in circles and also you're not wearing it on your body. But for the top it did actually make quite a significant difference. So when I started working with the new brand thread, it became very apparent that that thread was quite a bunch thicker than what I had been working with before. It was also like stiffer and even more annoying to hold somehow. It like hurt my hands at some point. But yeah, I noticed that it looked very different, like my squares became noticeably bigger. I was working on a 2mm crochet hook the entire time, and then I just did what you do when you're trying to achieve the same gauge but with a thicker yarn. I went down in needle size or hook size, I guess. So I tried a bunch of little gauge swatches, and in the end I decided to work with basically the smallest needle I could find in my collection of crochet hooks, which was a 0.6mm crochet hook. It was very tiny, and also it was okay. The thread didn't slip out of the hook as much as I was expecting it to, but it still happened quite a bunch. Anyway, that was the only thing I could find that could get me as close as possible to the gauge I had before. I still wasn't quite hitting it. The issue was really just that I had done the armhole with like decreases over here, and obviously I need to do the same thing in the back. So if I'm working the same amount of rows for the front and the back, and in the back my gauge is very different, then I'm gonna end up with different measurements. That was the main reason why I was trying to hit the exact gauge, because while you could tell that the squares were getting bigger, it was something that I don't think you would have really noticed in a finished object if you saw somebody out wearing it. Like obviously I would have been able to tell, but I don't think a stranger looking at my top would have noticed that the squares got bigger. But because of the armhole issue, I kind of had to fix it. So I continued working the back panel on the 0.6mm crochet hook. It was not fun. The hook was just noticeably too small for the thread. The thread was also like, I had a red line here at some point from holding it because I kept like pulling it through my hands like that, and I was already not having fun before I was having even less fun with that. So it was not a great time. At least most of the rest of it went well. I got to this point here in the back where I did this line of filled squares to bind off for the back. That obviously was a little bit higher than for the front, so that this would actually fit me. And then when it was time to do the straps, I didn't have any thread anymore, because since the thread was thicker, that also meant that it had less meterage than the thread I was working with before. So even though technically I had the 3 balls and it seemed like it would be enough, especially if I do less stitches on the back than on the front, it wasn't quite enough, and I ran out of yarn. And then I was met with the fun choice of either going with a different color for the straps or getting more crochet thread that I was trying to get out of stash. And I decided I'm not buying more crochet thread. I already have so much of it that I don't know what to do with. I did not want to have another like 3/4 ball of it left over. So I went back to what I have in stash and I tried to find the crochet thread out of all of the ones that I have that looked the most off-white. And I found a very tiny one, like the thread was so thin that I ended up holding that one double. So I was still working with the 0.6mm hook. And I think holding it double, I hit about the same gauge as I had before with the thicker thread I was already working with. So that thread was truly very tiny and it looked somewhat off-white from the outside. Not as off-white as what I had been working with, but way more off-white than everything else I had. And then since I was holding it double, I rolled some of it into a different ball, and then it was the evening while I was working on this. I was just trying to get it done. I did my straps and I was very happy. I attached everything, and then the next morning I woke up to wash this and block it, and I noticed that the straps were kind of very white, like a lot more white than the ball of crochet thread had looked from the outside. And I think what happened is that the thread was so old that it became yellow on the outside. Like the little paper that came with it said that the thread was made in West Germany. Like it was so old. So I think it had just been laying around in the back of some wardrobe for long enough that the color on the outside that was exposed to the air around it had changed. So in the end, that thread was exactly as bright white as every other thread I could have picked from my stash. So now the back of my straps is like very white and the rest of this is not. I don't think it's overly noticeable. It probably is when I put my hair up, but it is whatever really at this point. I'm still super happy I got this project done. I'm like proud of myself for sticking with it and actually doing it. It's also the first time I ever like successfully completed a crochet garment. I tried making a crochet garment once before, like years and years ago. At that time, I was crocheting quite a bunch. I never really kept track of what I made, so I honestly don't quite remember what I was doing the entire time, but I remember doing like coasters and stuff like that, like a lot of granny square things, just these types of projects. And it somehow never occurred to me that I could make garments from crochet. I don't know how. I have no idea what I was doing at that time, to be honest. Anyway, I was really only working with like acrylic yarns. I had one that I basically bought for everything, and I had like no idea about different yarn weights and all that. So at some point I got the idea that I should make a sweater, and I followed, I think, no tutorial at all. I was just going with vibes, and I crocheted an entire sweater in a very ugly bright green color. I don't know why I decided that would be a good idea. But yeah, I did the entire sweater and it did not look good because I had no idea how to make a sweater, and the yarn that I had chosen for it did just not produce a drape that was like suitable for a garment. It looked genuinely horrible, and I got rid of it soon after making it, even though I felt kind of bad for wasting the yarn and also my time, but well, it was one experience. And then I never made a sweater again, or any crochet garment, as you might imagine. So this is the first one I like finished and liked, so that's good. It obviously has its problems with the color change, and I mean the gauge is still not quite the same everywhere, but I can live with that, honestly. And the only thing I really did then is I attached it at the shoulders, and then I also attached it all the way down at the underarm. That was something I was kind of unsure about. For most of the project, I was thinking that maybe I will do some ties on the side, or I will only attach it part way and then have like a very flowy open split hem type of situation. But in the end, I don't know, I was very over this project and thinking about it, and I was just happy to have it done. And when I held it up to myself, it did look cool, just like closed on the sides. So that's just what I did, and now I have this top. For some reason, it immediately got like 10 degrees colder as soon as I finished this. I started thinking about if I wear this outside and it's like sunny and warm, which is the type of weather that I would wear something like this in, am I gonna get squares on my skin? Like, am I gonna, I don't know, get like a little bit of a tan going on and have squares on me? I don't know. Like, if you've ever made a filet crochet garment and you've worn it outside, did that happen to you? Because I'm a little bit worried about that now. Either way, I'm surprisingly happy with this. I feel like usually I am quite a perfectionist when it comes to not having like inconsistencies and mistakes in what I make. Like, I will unravel almost anything if I think I can get a better result. And the fact that there's gauge issues in that, and also a color change, and also the back panel isn't quite what I was planning it to be, I would think that I would be upset with this project, or that I would at least be, you know, slightly unhappy with my experience. But I'm just so relieved in a sense that I actually managed to finish this, because for large stretches of its existence on my needles, it genuinely looked like I wouldn't. So I'm really happy with this. I think it looks really cool too. I don't know, I wouldn't have thought that, but I'm pleased with my experience. I'm not gonna pick up a crochet hook for a little while. I think I need a break, and I think the next time I do a crochet project, I'm probably gonna attempt to do something slightly less ambitious. Just maybe a small project, maybe go back to the coasters and the bookmarks and stuff like that. Just something I don't need to worry about for 2.5 months, because that's a long time for me to work on a project. I'm usually more of a type of person who gets a project on their needles and then works on that and then gets it off. I don't keep a bunch of whips around, and having this like lingering whip type of situation where I have something laying there on my desk next to me staring at me for 2.5 months, and that was not my kind of thing. I did not enjoy that. I have one more finished object actually. Maybe I should have worn that today because I am a little bit cold, but I'm just so excited about this one being done. This is my second finished object, and this was in my plans last time and I finished it. And that was also like really quick. I knitted this in just over a week, I believe. This is my meadow sweater, which is my design, and I knitted now third version of it. This is what it came out like in this beautiful blue color. The meadow sweater is a saddle shoulder and raglan construction with like the slightest bit of a v-neck, I guess. And other than that, it's a pretty basic sweater. It has some like rolled edge finishings with a tiny bit of ribbing, and the original has stripes, which is, I guess, the main star of the show in that case. And the sweater is currently in testing, so hopefully I'll be able to share the pattern with you in a few weeks. I'll see how long it takes my testers to get everything done. I did have like a deadline for the testnet, but it's turned out that for a bunch of people the yarn delivery took quite a while, and I've also had a few people join a bit later, so we'll see. We'll just all finish our projects and I'll get my feedback in, and then this pattern will be out, I guess, like very late summer or early fall, sometime around then, probably September, I guess. So I started my testnet, and then I was in this Instagram group chat with a lot of my testers, and they were all chatting about what yarn they're getting and what color stripes they're doing, and it was really fun. And I was getting, I felt a little bit left out because everyone was like working on their sweater and I didn't have one. So I spontaneously decided I'm gonna cast on another one, and I'm gonna do it in a solid color version, just in case maybe people are interested in just making a very basic version of it. And once the pattern comes out, it would just be nice if on Ravelry there are a few projects, and maybe it would be cool to have one that is just a basic color. I now have some testers that are also doing just one basic color, I think, but this is what mine turned out like. I got the drops, how's it called, soft tweed, I believe, for this, which is a yarn that I've been eyeing for a while. I've never really worked with a tweed yarn, and I think they're really cute for basics like that, just because they're one color, so they're easy to style and they're still basic, but they have a little bit of something going on, so it doesn't look as plain. And I think that's probably my favorite part of this version. I think the tweed looks very cool. I will say that I don't know if I will get this yarn again because it feels very slightly itchy to me, which is an issue I have a lot with alpaca, where some of the alpaca yarns are completely fine for me and I can't feel a thing and they're really soft and nice, and then some other alpaca yarns are a bit itchy to me. And that's not something I have with other fibers, like even wool. I would say there are wools that are rustic and that feel scratchy to me, but not itchy. And I think the scratchy feeling is kind of fine to me, like I can live with that. But the itchy it's just a bit uncomfortable, especially like around my neck up here. So I don't know if I will be working with this yarn again, just because of my personal preference. There was nothing wrong with it. I did genuinely enjoy my experience using it, but maybe not quite for me. We'll see how much I wear this. I don't think it's bothering me enough that I wouldn't wear this, but I can kind of feel it when I have it on. There's definitely yarns that contain alpaca where it's worse for me, but this one I can feel a tiny bit, and I think it's enough that I probably wouldn't buy the yarn again. But well, yeah. I'm still glad I tried it because I do enjoy the way it looks, and it was a fun time knitting it up. It went very quickly. This is like a type of construction I really enjoy knitting up as well, which makes sense because I designed it, but I really like the long yoke rounds. I like having all of the stitches on my needles, like raglan construction, circular yoke construction, stuff like that. That is something that I just prefer from a process knitting perspective over drop shoulders, for example, where you're working flat a bunch and you're like putting stitches on hold and all that. Obviously you're putting your sleeve stitches on hold here, but I would still rather do that than pick them up later, I guess. So I flew through the yoke in really like 2 days, I guess, and then the rest of the body and the sleeves also went very, very quickly. For the sleeves of this sweater, I actually tried something I've never done before, and that is that I knitted part of this on double pointed needles. I don't have a lot of double pointed needles. I think I have like some 5mm ones that I bought when I first wanted to try knitting. Like I went to the yarn store and I got these needles without ever knowing what circular needles even are. So I have those, and then I have, I think, some in 2.5mm that I got gifted at some point, and the only other ones that I own are some that I got from my grandma stuff when she gave all of it to me. So I have some 3mm ones, but there's only 2 of them, and then I have some 3.5mm ones, but there's only 4 of them, and I think there's supposed to be 5. So that's just what I had, and I kind of came across them while I was working on the sleeve. It's not the smallest circumference. I think if you have a 40cm cable, this should be like doable on the 40cm cable, but I didn't. Like my shortest cable for my 3.5mm needles was 50cm. I actually bought a fixed circular needle that has a 40cm cable because I run into this issue so often. I work with 3.5mm needles like all the time, and I never have this short cable, so it finally bothered me enough that I got the fixed circular for it. But for this sleeve I didn't have it yet, and I somehow came across these double pointed needles and thought it would be fun to give them a try. It was okay, I would say. I don't know if it'll become my favorite method. I've tried it for both of these sleeves now, and I kind of get the appeal. Like I would probably do that over magic loop for most circumferences. Like if it's a bigger small circumference like that, I get it. Like it's not overly fiddly if you already have a good part of the sleeve worked, and it was okay, but it was still costing me a bunch of time compared to just knitting it on a circular needle. Maybe that's just practice. Maybe I would get better at it if I did it more, but I think for sleeves like that, I would rather just like use my 40cm cable from now on. The double pointed needles, it's okay. I think maybe it might be more fun if you actually have 5 of them, because it was still like stretched kind of weird, but like paying attention to all of the needles that none of them slide out, and like slipping your stitches through them, and I don't know, it wasn't that fun. It worked, and I was glad I didn't have to do magic loop, but probably not going to be my favorite method. And then once I was done with this one, I promptly cast on a new project because I'm kind of on a bit of a journey to get rid of stash yarn at the moment. I actually sat down and I did some very extensive planning for basically everything that I have in stash. So other than the crochet thread I mentioned earlier, I think for basically every yarn that I own at this point, I have some plan, and I might actually be able to execute all of them by the end of the year. I'm not usually somebody who keeps a lot of stash yarn around. I just have like leftovers from projects I did at this point. So I have a few single skeins and the rest is just stuff I have left over. And I think what really helped me with this was making my, or the first rendition of my meadow sweater. That was just something I self-drafted with stash yarn, really just for myself. It wasn't intended to be a pattern at that point. But I had this big bag of cotton yarns, and in my mind, before I started that project, they all didn't go together because they were all like different brands and bought for different purposes and used for different projects. So I didn't really group them in together until I like actually sat down and took all of them out and looked at them and wrote down all of the information about them and did a swatch and actually saw them together. And that was when I realized, oh, I can actually use those in the same project. And I think that was something I was struggling with quite a lot up until this point, where if I bought like some yarn for a sweater project and then I made that sweater and I had some yarn left over, that I was only thinking about ways to use it up that would use up all of these yarns together, and I wasn't really mixing and matching yarn from different projects. So if I had leftovers from sweater A and leftovers from sweater B, I wasn't thinking about putting those together to make something new. I was more like thinking, how can I get rid of the leftovers from sweater A, and then how can I get rid of the leftovers from sweater B. So I think that shifted something in my mind, making that cotton sweater and realizing that even if the yarns aren't quite the same, or in my mind they don't really go together, I can still probably use them in the same project and it will be fine. So that really helped me, and I sat down and I did a bunch of planing. And one thing I came up with is that I had this yarn here from my like proper sample of my meadow sweater, like the first real sample that is going to be in all of the pictures and everything. This is BC Garn's Big Bio Balance, and I knitted my meadow sweater in this pink, this white, and also a green that I'm not using for this project. And then I also found this in my stash. This is from Expression Fiber Arts. This is a merino, so a different fiber, a totally different brand. You know, like before in my mind that didn't really go together, but then when I took everything out and I saw these three colors together, I thought that actually looks quite cute. And this was exactly enough yarn for me to make a little summer top still. So I thought it is the end of summer now, definitely, but I knit quite quickly and I am quite good at getting a project on and off my needles in the same way. So I decided I would probably still have enough time to cast on a summer top and then finish it for this summer. And even if it gets done a little bit later, I will have it for the next few years. So it should be fine. All of these yarns are probably a bit warmer than what I would go for summer top ideally. So these are like half wool and this is a merino obviously. So probably wouldn't have been my first choice if I would have bought yarn for a summer top. But I'll see if I wear this, and even if I don't wear it in summer, I can wear it like layered in the colder months as well. And this is the monstrosity I came up with. This is the Emmy top by Petite Knit. I kind of didn't realize she released a pattern. Somehow I was able to completely dodge that information, and I came across it randomly on Ravelry, I believe, when I was browsing through all kinds of patterns to possibly make from this, because I just didn't feel like self-drafting anymore. So I found this one, and what I liked about it, I don't know, it looks very like clean. I like the straps on it a lot, I guess. I think they're not double knitted from what I read in the pattern. You're like folding them in on themselves somehow. I'm not quite sure. I've read ahead, but it was like a week ago, so I don't quite remember what you do. But they look double knitted from the outside, at least. I did enjoy that little detail. And it just, the yarn amounts were perfect, the gauge was perfect, so I thought might as well make that one. Seemed simple enough, and it wasn't simple enough. What happened here essentially, I definitely have enough yarn to finish the top, but my mission is to use up all of my stash yarn. So in the end, when I'm done with this top, I don't want to have any leftovers. So that was the problem I was trying to solve. However, the Emmy top is knitted bottom up, and I just didn't feel like guessing how long I can make the body to then complete the front and back section, because I just knew I would have yarn left over in the end and it would bother me. So I did kind of what the pattern recommended, or the pattern gives you a little tip for how to start the top in the middle and then work it upwards for like this part up here, and then you can pick up the stitches down here later and work the body down, which is, I guess, a great option if you're not sure if you have enough yarn. I was just doing it to use up all of my yarn so I can make the body however long I have yarn for. And that was really complicated for some reason. I'm not sure if that was just a me issue or if it is that complicated. Maybe I was just not in the right headspace to do that the day I was doing it. I have no idea, but what the pattern recommended and also gave a little like video tutorial link for was to do Judy's Magic Cast On, which is what I did down here where this second needle is in my knitting. How do I best show this side? So this is where I started, and these needles here that have the stoppers on them, these are from when I did the Magic Cast On. Judy's Magic Cast On is a cast on technique that I've used once before for toe-up socks, which I think is really the only use case you would usually need Judy's Magic Cast On for. And it is a cast on technique where you create the stitches to both sides of where you're casting on. I don't know how much sense that makes or how to properly describe it, but in the end you have two needles and you have live stitches on both of them, and that way you can start your toe-up socks usually and just knit the toe like in magic loop upwards, I guess. And here you're just using it so you have stitches on this side that I've now knitted up to here. This is my live stitches that I'm working on, and you still have stitches on a different pair of needles that are these ones with the needle stoppers in them. So that's what I tried to do, and I failed I think like 3 times, because you have to hold two like pairs of circular needles next to each other, and then you cast on both of them, and you cast on twice the amount of stitches you would need for the circumference of the body, so it's quite a lot of stitches to cast on. And the Judy's Magic Cast On, it doesn't really like stick. You're not really doing a knot, I guess. You're just wrapping your yarn around your needle, and you can't really let go of anything or it will completely unravel and fall apart. So it's a lot of stitches and they might come undone any moment, which is already a little bit complicated. Like, it's fine if you're casting on 8 stitches for the toe of a sock, but if you're casting on like hundreds of stitches, it was a little bit complicated to do. And then also I'm just not that used to doing that type of cast on, so I was learning how to do that as well. And I feel like the cast on is really difficult in a sense. Like, it's technically easy to do. You hold your yarn kind of like you would hold it for a long tail cast on, so like this. But then you like take your top needle and you go under that one and over that one, and the bottom needle goes over that one and under that one. And it's not hard, but once you do it like 5 times, you think you have it, and then your hands just keep going, and then your brain doesn't pay attention anymore, and then you forgot what you were just doing. It's like when you're doing something that's muscle memory, and then you start thinking about it too much, and then it doesn't work anymore. That's the entire story of this cast on to me. So I was trying to do that. I was struggling already, and then at some point I finally had all stitches on my needle, I thought, and I just couldn't figure out how to connect in the round without twisting them. I was trying to follow the tutorial, and I also had like a different tutorial just for Judy's Magic Cast On open. I'm still not sure what happened, but it seemed like my needles had switched cables. I don't know. I couldn't figure out what went wrong. Anyway, I undid all of them and I started over. And then everything that happened from here was my mistake, but I tried to put these stitches that are on my second needle over here, the ones that I need later to continue the body, I tried to put them on hold so they wouldn't be on this cable, because it's really annoying to work when you have the second cable in, especially if you're still like closer to it. The tensioning is kind of difficult with the cable in there, and I mean all of the needles just keep getting in the way, so it's annoying. So I put all of these stitches on hold. I like threaded a different piece of yarn through here. And then I wanted to pull my second needle out, and I accidentally pulled the wrong needle. So I pulled out the needle that had my stitches that I wanted to work on, and that did not have the stitches on the stitch holder. So I like ruined that for myself. Did I start over at that point? No, I didn't. I picked them back up. I was insane enough to actually go in and pick all of these stitches back up, even though there was like this much knitting and it took forever. I picked all of them back up and I thought I fixed it. And then while doing that, I somehow twisted my work. So then I continued working and it was twisted. And then I completely unraveled and started over again. So from my idea of, oh, I will just make a very quick little summer top project to that point was already like, I don't know, days in between. because I was struggling so much with casting on that way, and in retrospect, I don't recommend. As I said, I don't know, maybe it's my fault, maybe I was just being very stupid that day, but that took so long and cost me so many nerves, and in the end, what did I do it for? So I won't have to get rid of like 20 meters of yarn I might have left over. That was so not worth it. Anyway, I have made it now beyond the point of the cast on, I think, and I'm now working on the front panel. So what I did is I just, well, I'm doing stripes, obviously, because I have 3 different colors. The original is just one color, and for the stripe pattern, I decided to do something slightly more interesting because I've been working a lot of striped things this summer. I did the first rendition of my meadow sweater, and then I did my proper meadow sweater, and then I also did a striped top. So I didn't just want to do this color stripe, this color stripe, this color stripe again. I also, these are only half a ball, so these are 50 grams. All of these come in 100-gram balls. So these are 50 grams and this is 100 grams. So I have like twice as much of this as I have of each of those. So it would have been like a 4-row stripe, 2-row stripe, 2-row stripe anyway, and I decided to come up with something slightly more interesting. So now I have this. I'm not going to try to explain what I was doing. I already tried to explain it for the project vlog for this one, and I don't think there is a good way to explain this verbally, but this is the stripe sequence I landed on. So I'm doing that, and I decided to just keep going for the body for about as long as it would take to cover my bust, I think. Because if there's any line visible later on from where I did this Judy's Magic cast on, which I think there will be like the tiniest hint of an inconsistency, because I think for the sample, I think Petite Knit probably did that too, because in the sample picture you can kind of see where that might have happened, I believe. Maybe I'm like imagining things, but I think you can kind of see it, like very slightly if you're looking for it, not actually see it. Anyway, if there's any line, I wanted to be in kind of a good place, so I decided like under my bust would be a good place for it. So I've just worked, I think, like 10 centimeters for the body, and then I started working the front panel is this, I believe. For this top, since it is worked bottom up, you work the body in the round and then you bind off stitches for the underarm over here, and then there's some decreasing along this side for the armhole, and now I've just been working straight back and forth, no increases, no decreases. And I believe now I kind of start working on the straps, so this is going to be the front, and now I have to do something about the straps. I haven't read ahead yet. It was a little bit complicated because, as I said, I'm doing stripes, so I'm also knitting jogless stripes at the beginning of the round, because I'm doing jogless stripes on this side, and there's this lifted stitch here that you can kind of see. I'm also doing the lifted stitch on the other side. So I knew that this would have to be like the middle of my underarm for it to look good. This will just be on the side of my body, this line. And in the pattern, the body is just knitted in the round in one color, so it doesn't really matter where you start your front panel and your back panel once you work on that. So you just start casting off the stitches from the beginning of round, which didn't really make sense for me because I wanted this to be the middle of the underarm. So I had to do some tweaking over there, and I don't think I did it quite correctly or quite the way it was supposed to be in the pattern, but I figured out a way of doing it that worked out. So this is what I have now, and I do have the correct stitch counts now for this front panel, so it's all good. I will probably work on this a bunch over the next few days because it is getting colder already, as I was mentioning, and I would kind of like to have this top done before it's like properly fall, so I can still wear it a little bit. I think it looks surprisingly nice when I hold it up to me like that. I keep saying that about all of the scrappy and striped projects I've been doing this summer, just because when I buy yarn, like it's expensive to buy yarn, and then it takes you so much time to knit up a garment from it that I struggle a bit to go for colors that don't feel super safe to me, that I don't already know are gonna look good on me. Because if I'm investing that much time and effort and money into a project, I obviously want it to be as good as possible. So this summer I've worked with quite a bunch of colors that I wouldn't usually go for. And all of them have looked surprisingly good on me. I think it's because I have the white stripe in there, so that kind of balances it out a little bit. But that's like the main thing that I cast on and the main thing that I'll be working on for now, just to get this done. And then probably I will be moving on to some more fall type projects already. And then I have one very tiny whip with some other leftover yarn that I had. This is some Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair, I think is the name, that I have left over from my cloud blouse, and it is a very tiny amount of yarn. So this was, I think, 74 meters total, if I remember correctly, both of these. I had them wound up together, so I actually had to separate the two strands to do this, which was not a fun time. I even tried that trick where you put the mohair in the freezer so you can separate it more easily, and it didn't help at all. At least it made no noticeable difference to me. Anyways, I spent the whole evening separating these two strands in hopes that I could make like a tiny little scarf project, because what are you really going to do out of 74 meters of mohair? I have no idea. There's nothing except it's tiny scarves, so that's what I decided to cast on. I'm working on 3mm needles, and I'm not following a pattern. It's kind of like Sophie's scarf type of scarf, just I'm just doing I-cord on both sides and then garter stitch in the middle, and occasional increases. I've been doing them every 4 centimeters, and then I think I'll be working one more increase if I'm sticking to my plan, and then just I'll be working back and forth with like this tiny little bit of scarf until I run out of this ball of yarn, and then I have the second one that should be exactly as much yarn if I've split them up correctly, and then hopefully I can get the second part of the scarf done. And this is kind of the project I need advice with, because I don't know if I like it. I mean, it looks okay, but also it's not that great. I feel like even though I am on 3mm needles, this is still very see-through. It doesn't look the most consistent, I guess. I don't know if I enjoy the increasing. You can like very definitely tell that there was an increase here, there was an increase like over here, there was an increase over here. Like you can just see that. Maybe that will be better with blocking, but I'm not the biggest fan of this project, to be honest. But I can't come up with anything better to do with this tiny bit of mohair. So if you happen to be in the same situation, or if you have been in the same situation and you've come up with a good solution for what to do with a tiny amount of leftover mohair, I would love to hear from you. I'm open to unraveling this if it doesn't work out, because I don't know. It's like, it's okay. I would probably wear this if I finish it, but I'm not like attached to it or excited about it. It's kind of just something to do, so I have the yarn out of stash, but I don't know if this is a good project, to be honest. So we'll see. Maybe either next time we talk this is a finished object, or it doesn't exist anymore and it is hopefully something else. But if you're more creative than me, you can let me know what to do with this. And then for my plans and acquisitions section this time, I actually have acquisitions. Wait, I need to get them. Okay, I found them. How do I explain this? I know I just said that I want to get rid of my stash yarn. However, in planning to get rid of my stash yarn, I had an idea for something I might do that required me to get more yarn. From how I planned this, I should be able to use up all of the yarn that I got still, so we would still end with 0 stash yarn. However, I don't know if I should be excited about this. I kind of am, but I am also worried I might very much not be excited about it the second I start working on it. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I don't really like making socks. I basically never make them, and every time I've tried, something has gone horribly wrong. However, I also admit that I haven't really given sock knitting a very fair chance. I've always just done it because I had yarn I didn't know what else to do with. I had yarn that I didn't really enjoy the colors of. I was making a gift knit, you know, like I never really made a sock I'm super excited about. And maybe that's the issue. Maybe I should give it a fair chance, because I found some Aran weight yarn in my stash that I might make socks from. And then I found some sport weight yarn in my stash that I could make socks from. And then I was thinking it would actually be like a cool video to just get some fingering weight yarn and make like 3 or 4 pairs of socks for one video. Just so I've tried all the types of socks that you can make. And then I can actually decide to hate sock knitting forever after I've given it an actual fair chance. I've used colors that I enjoy. I've made the socks for myself. I've made patterns that I enjoy. At that point, I find that it's fair for me to say I don't like it. So I'm going to be making 4 pairs of socks, hopefully. I have the yarn for it, so now I have to. But in this blue bowl over here, it's so hard to point to it. Why is it so difficult? Okay, I got it, this one. There's the other yarns that I already had in stash, and then I got some fingering weight sock yarn to make socks with, and I got this one. This is Jawohl by Lang Yarns, and I got this purple and this white. I got 2 balls of the purple. The first one I already wound up because I was very fascinated when I got this. When it arrived, it said on the paper that there's a reinforcement thread in here, and you can kind of feel it. It's like in the middle of this weirdly shaped. Why is this rolled up so cylindrical? I've never seen yarn like that. Anyways, you can feel it on the inside of this, and I couldn't get it out, so I already rolled up one of the balls so I could see what it looks like. This is what came out of it. I'm assuming this is what you hold with like the toe or the heel of the sock maybe to make it a bit sturdier. But yeah, this is what it looks like, and hopefully for a video, it might be a little while. I have some other videos planned fast, so it might be a while before you see this or hear about this again, but I will probably be making a pair of socks with Aran weight yarn on 3.5mm needles, 1 pair of socks with a sport weight yarn on 3mm needles, which both of these yarns I still have in stash. They're in here, somewhere. And then I will be making 2 pairs of fingering weight socks with what I have here. Hopefully. I'll be trying like a bunch of different techniques. I have some of these tiny circular needles and then magic loop obviously, and I also have some double pointed needles I could use for this, so I'll be just trying different things, different yarn weights, different types of ways of making socks, and hopefully in the end I'll find like at least one way of making socks that I enjoy. That would be kind of cool, because otherwise the whole video will just be me complaining that I still don't like making socks while I make 4 pairs of socks. I hope that doesn't happen, but at the very least it will be entertaining, hopefully. And I at least get 4 pairs of socks out of it, so that's something. But that's one of my plans. More of a future plan, but we'll see. And then I also have a bunch of other stash yarn that I want to use for small accessory projects that I will also be tackling sometime soon. Maybe I'll make a bit of a challenge out of it. See how much of it I can get done in a fixed amount of time. I don't know if it'll be 5 days or a week yet. I'm still thinking about that. We'll see. But that's in my plans. I'm not going to give too much information about that in case anything changes. But I believe I already mentioned making the Jackie bandana by Susanne Müller or Paula Strickt last time, which will be one of these plans, hopefully. And other than that, I'm not going to go into too much detail now, because I will be giving you a bunch of plans and then I will never get to them. I think we've chatted enough for now, and you know, like the main things I'll be up to. I still have some garments and stuff planned as well, but I think for like the next few weeks this is what I'll mostly be focusing on. For now I'll just finish my summer top though, I think, because it's so I'm freezing here. I've also been drinking iced coffee, that might not have helped. Anyway, I will go find a sweater now, and I hope I'll see you around for all of the projects I've been planning.